Portland, Oregon, July 15, 1994. The morning sun cast long shadows across Pioneer Courthouse Square as festival organizers arrived to assess the aftermath of what should have been another successful day at Portland's annual summer festival. Among the scattered debris and empty vendor stalls, one conspicuous absence would soon launch an investigation that would remain unsolved for nearly 3 decades. Michael Thompson's food truck, Michael's Kitchen, had vanished without a trace during the night. The 34-year-old entrepreneur had been operating his mobile restaurant at the festival for 3 consecutive years, building a loyal customer base with his signature barbecue sandwiches and homemade potato salad. His bright red truck, adorned with hand-painted yellow lettering, had become a fixture at local events throughout the Pacific Northwest. "So glad to have you here. Comment your city so I can bring cases from your region and also know where you're watching me from." Festival coordinator Jennifer Walsh discovered the empty space where Michael's truck had been stationed the previous evening. The asphalt showed no signs of struggle, no scattered equipment, and no indication of what had transpired in the hours between closing time and dawn. The methodical way the truck had been removed suggested this was not a random act of theft. Security footage from a nearby bank revealed the only clue to Michael's whereabouts. At precisely 3:47 a.m., grainy surveillance cameras captured his red food truck slowly pulling away from the festival grounds. The driver remained obscured by shadows, but investigators noted that the vehicle's movements appeared deliberate and unhurried, lacking the erratic behavior typically associated with vehicle theft. Portland police initially classified the incident as grand theft auto, a routine crime that generated little media attention. Detective William Foster, assigned to the case, conducted standard interviews with festival vendors and security personnel. Most witnesses reported nothing unusual about Michael's behavior during the final day of operations. He had served customers with his characteristic friendliness, cleaned his equipment thoroughly, and secured his truck according to established protocols. However, Jennifer Walsh noticed inconsistencies in the testimonies. Several vendors mentioned seeing Michael engaged in what appeared to be intense conversations with individuals who were not festival participants. These mysterious figures had approached his truck separately throughout the evening, each conversation lasting approximately 10 to 15 minutes. None of the witnesses could provide detailed descriptions of these visitors, noting only that they seemed out of place among the typical festival crowd. Michael's personal life revealed no obvious motives for voluntary disappearance. He lived alone in a modest apartment in southeast Portland, maintaining a simple lifestyle that reflected his small business earnings. His landlord, Robert Chen, described him as a reliable tenant who paid rent promptly and kept to himself. Michael had no known enemies, outstanding debts, or romantic entanglements that might explain his sudden absence. The discovery of Michael's untouched apartment deepened the mystery surrounding his disappearance. Police found his personal belongings exactly as he had left them, including a wallet containing $237 in cash, his social security card, and a recently renewed driver's license. His bed appeared slept in, suggesting he had returned home after the festival and left again voluntarily. Bank records showed no unusual financial activity in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. Michael's checking account contained just over $3,000, representing typical earnings from his food truck operations. He had no credit cards, loans, or investments that might indicate financial distress or windfall profits that could motivate criminal targeting. Family members painted a picture of a man content with his chosen lifestyle, but occasionally expressing concerns about unspecified business pressures. Michael's sister, living in Sacramento, recalled their last phone conversation 2 weeks before the festival. He had mentioned feeling overwhelmed by certain aspects of running a small business, but provided no specific details about the nature of his concerns. The investigation took an unexpected turn when phone records revealed a call made from Michael's apartment at 2:15 a.m. on the night of his disappearance. The 15-minute conversation connected to a payphone located 3 miles from the festival grounds. Police canvassed the area surrounding the payphone, but found no witnesses who recalled seeing anyone using the device during the early morning hours. Detective Foster's investigation gradually lost momentum as leads dried up and other cases demanded attention. The Portland Police Department's limited resources prevented extensive follow-up on what appeared to be a straightforward theft case. Michael's truck had likely been driven out of state and stripped for parts, a common fate for stolen commercial vehicles. Festival operations resumed the following year without Michael's kitchen, though Jennifer Walsh continued to reserve his usual spot for several months, hoping for his return. Other vendors gradually filled the space, but long-time festival attendees frequently inquired about the popular barbecue stand and its mysteriously absent owner. The case file grew thin over subsequent months, containing only basic police reports, witness statements, and a few photographs of the empty truck space. No arrests were made, no suspects were identified, and no additional evidence surfaced to explain Michael Thompson's disappearance. The red food truck never reappeared at any regional festivals or events, despite widespread distribution of photographs and vehicle identification numbers. As 1994 drew to a close, Michael's case joined thousands of other unsolved disappearances in police databases across the country. His sister continued making inquiries for several years, but eventually accepted that her brother had likely become the victim of a crime that would never be solved. The annual summer festival continued without incident, and Michael Thompson's name faded from public memory. Yet certain details about that July morning would continue to trouble Jennifer Walsh for decades to come. The precision of the truck's removal, the mysterious late-night conversations, and the unexplained phone call suggested a complexity that standard theft investigations had failed to uncover. Something far more sinister than simple vehicle theft had occurred at the 1994 Portland Summer Festival, and the truth remained buried beneath layers of incomplete investigation and unanswered questions. Portland, Oregon, September 2023. 29 years after Michael Thompson's mysterious disappearance, retired festival coordinator Jennifer Walsh was clearing out her basement storage when she stumbled upon a box of documents that would reignite one of Portland's most perplexing unsolved cases. The cardboard container, weathered and forgotten among Christmas decorations and old tax records, contained detailed files from the 1994 Summer Festival that had never been turned over to police. Among the yellowed papers and faded photographs, Jennifer discovered vendor applications, security reports, and incident logs that painted a far more complex picture than the simple theft case that police had pursued decades earlier. Her meticulous record-keeping, a professional habit that had served her well during 30 years of event management, had inadvertently preserved crucial evidence that might finally explain what happened to Michael Thompson. The most significant discovery came in the form of incident reports filed by other festival vendors during the week of Michael's disappearance. 3 separate business owners had documented unusual activities that police investigators had apparently never connected to the missing food truck case. David Martinez, who operated a jewelry booth, reported strange individuals photographing his setup and asking detailed questions about his daily routines and cash handling procedures. Similarly, Sarah Mitchell, who sold handmade crafts, noted in her vendor evaluation form that suspicious figures had been conducting what appeared to be surveillance of various booths throughout the festival week. Her report specifically mentioned seeing the same unfamiliar faces on multiple days, individuals who showed no interest in purchasing merchandise but spent considerable time observing vendor operations. A third report, filed by electronics vendor James Rodriguez, described an attempted break-in at his booth during the festival's second night. Security footage from his personal camera revealed shadowy figures attempting to access his cash box, though they fled when his alarm system activated. The incident had been reported to festival security but never escalated to police, as nothing was actually stolen. Jennifer realized that these seemingly unrelated incidents, when viewed together, suggested a coordinated effort to target festival vendors. The pattern indicated advanced planning and surveillance rather than opportunistic crime. Michael Thompson's food truck might not have been randomly selected, but specifically chosen for reasons that remained unclear. Determined to uncover the truth that had eluded investigators nearly 3 decades earlier, Jennifer contacted retired Portland police detective Robert Chen, who had worked peripheral cases during the same time period. Chen, now 72 and living quietly in suburban Beaverton, initially expressed skepticism about reopening such an old case. However, when Jennifer presented the newly discovered documents, his professional instincts were immediately activated. Robert Chen's experience investigating organized crime during the 1990s provided crucial context for understanding the patterns that Jennifer had identified. He explained that the surveillance techniques and systematic targeting of small business vendors were consistent with money laundering operations that had plagued Portland during that era. Criminal organizations often used legitimate businesses to clean illegal proceeds, sometimes requiring intimidation or elimination of uncooperative business owners. The detectives' archived notes from 1994 revealed additional connections that had never been fully explored. During the week of Michael's disappearance, Chen had been investigating a separate case involving suspected money laundering through construction companies and small retail establishments. Several business owners had reported unusual pressure to accept large cash payments for services or to participate in transactions that seemed disproportionate to their normal operations. Further investigation revealed that Michael Thompson had been approached multiple times during the months preceding the festival by individuals claiming to represent a catering company interested in purchasing his recipes and business model. These approaches, initially dismissed as legitimate business inquiries, took on sinister implications when viewed alongside the surveillance activities documented by other vendors. Bank records, finally accessible after decades due to expired privacy restrictions, showed that Michael had received several large cash deposits in the weeks before his disappearance. The deposits were unusual for a small food truck operation, each ranging between $2,000 and $5,000. The source of these funds remained unclear, but the timing suggested possible connection to the mysterious business inquiries. Jennifer and Robert discovered that Michael had scheduled a meeting with an accountant for the week following the festival, specifically requesting assistance with tax implications of significant income increases. The appointment, never kept due to his disappearance, indicated that Michael might have been grappling with financial situations beyond his typical business operations. Property records revealed another disturbing pattern. 3 other small business owners who had operated at Portland area festivals during 1994 had either disappeared, died under suspicious circumstances, or abruptly sold their businesses and left the state within 6 months of Michael's vanishing. The statistical probability of such coincidences occurring naturally was virtually impossible. Most shocking was the discovery that Michael's food truck had been located just 3 weeks after his disappearance, abandoned in a parking lot in Spokane, Washington. The vehicle showed no signs of forced entry or mechanical problems, suggesting it had been deliberately driven there and left. This crucial information had never been included in the original police reports or shared with Michael's family, raising serious questions about the thoroughness of the initial investigation. The truck's recovery location provided the first concrete lead in nearly 3 decades. Spokane was approximately 350 miles from Portland, representing a deliberate journey rather than random abandonment. Security footage from nearby businesses in 1994 was long since destroyed, but the location itself offered important clues about the disappearance's true nature. Jennifer's determination to find answers led her to contact Michael's surviving family members, including his sister in Sacramento, who had never stopped wondering about her brother's fate. The sister revealed that Michael had sent her a letter just days before the festival, expressing concerns about pressure he was facing from unnamed individuals who wanted him to participate in activities he found ethically questionable. As Jennifer and Robert delved deeper into the evidence, they realized that Michael Thompson's case was far more complex than a simple business owner who had run afoul of thieves. The systematic nature of the surveillance, the unusual financial activities, and the pattern of other business owners facing similar pressures suggested involvement in a larger criminal operation that had successfully evaded law enforcement for decades. The investigation was about to uncover connections that would expose a web of corruption reaching into the highest levels of Portland's business and political establishment, with implications that extended far beyond a single missing food truck owner. Portland, Oregon, October 2023. The breakthrough that Jennifer Walsh and retired detective Robert Chen had been seeking came through an unexpected source. A former city employee named William Foster, who had worked in the Portland Building Permits Department during the 1990s. Foster, now battling terminal cancer and seeking to clear his conscience, contacted Jennifer after seeing local news coverage of the renewed investigation into Michael Thompson's disappearance. Foster's revelations painted a disturbing picture of systematic corruption that had infected multiple levels of Portland's municipal government during the mid-1990s. His position in the building permits office had given him first-hand knowledge of a money laundering scheme that used construction projects and small businesses to clean proceeds from illegal activities ranging from drug trafficking to tax evasion. The operation was masterminded by David Martinez, who had leveraged his position as a city councilman to facilitate fraudulent permits and inspect approvals for construction projects that existed primarily on paper. These phantom developments served as vehicles for legitimizing large sums of cash, which were then distributed through a network of cooperating small business owners who received generous payments for minimal services. Michael Thompson had apparently stumbled upon this scheme when he was approached to participate in what appeared to be legitimate catering contracts for city events and construction site meal services. The contracts offered payments far exceeding market rates, requiring only that Michael accept large cash payments and provide basic documentation for services that were either minimal or entirely fictional. Initial cooperation with these arrangements explained the unusual cash deposits that Jennifer and Robert had discovered in Michael's bank records. However, Foster revealed that Michael had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the arrangement as he began to understand its true nature. The food truck owner had started asking questions about the legitimacy of the payments and expressing concerns about potential tax implications. Foster's insider knowledge revealed that the corruption network included several high-ranking police officials who ensured that investigations into related activities were either misdirected or quietly closed. Detective William Foster, who had been assigned to investigate Michael's disappearance, was actually a key participant in the scheme, using his position to protect the operation from law enforcement scrutiny. The systematic nature of the corruption explained many of the anomalies that had puzzled Jennifer and Robert during their investigation. The failure to properly investigate the other vendor incidents at the 1994 festival, the lack of follow-up on Michael's recovered truck in Spokane, and the general disinterest in pursuing leads all reflected deliberate sabotage rather than investigative incompetence. Bank records from the era, finally accessible through Freedom of Information Act requests, revealed the full scope of the money laundering operation. Millions of dollars had flowed through the network of compromised businesses over a period of several years, with participants receiving substantial compensation for their cooperation. The scheme had operated with remarkable sophistication, using legitimate business structures to mask illegal financial activities. Foster provided names and dates that allowed Jennifer and Robert to construct a comprehensive picture of the criminal network. In addition to Councilman David Martinez and Detective William Foster, the operation included construction company executives, bank officials, and dozens of small business owners throughout the Portland metropolitan area. The scheme had generated enormous profits while successfully avoiding detection by federal authorities. The most disturbing revelation concerned the fate of business owners who had attempted to withdraw from the scheme or threatened to expose its operations. Foster confirmed that Michael Thompson was not the only individual who had disappeared after expressing reservations about continued participation. At least 4 other small business owners had either vanished, died under suspicious circumstances, or been forced to flee the area during the same time period. One case involved restaurant owner Anthony Williams, whose establishment had been destroyed in an apparent arson fire 3 months after Michael's disappearance. Williams had survived the incident but immediately closed his business and moved to another state without explanation. Another participant, craft store owner Jessica Miller, had been found deceased in her home from an apparent prescription drug overdose, despite having no history of substance abuse. Foster's account revealed that the network employed intimidation tactics designed to ensure participant compliance and silence. Business owners who cooperated received lucrative compensation and protection, while those who resisted faced escalating pressure that could culminate in violence or elimination. Michael Thompson's disappearance had served as a warning to other potential dissidents within the operation. The investigation uncovered evidence that the corruption scheme had connections extending beyond Portland's municipal boundaries. Federal agencies had been conducting parallel investigations into similar operations in other Pacific Northwest cities, suggesting that the Portland network was part of a regional criminal enterprise with sophisticated organizational structures and political connections. Financial records revealed that the scheme's profits had been used to fund political campaigns, purchase real estate, and establish legitimate businesses that further expanded the network's influence and reach. Several current Portland business leaders and political figures had received significant financial benefits from the operation, though their level of awareness regarding its illegal nature remained unclear. Foster provided Jennifer and Robert with copies of documents that he had secretly maintained for nearly 3 decades, including correspondence between key participants, financial records showing fund transfers, and photographs of meetings between conspirators. This evidence represented the most comprehensive documentation of the corruption scheme that had ever been assembled. The documents revealed that Michael Thompson had been specifically targeted for elimination after he had secretly recorded conversations with scheme participants and threatened to take his evidence to federal authorities. Foster confirmed that Michael had possessed detailed financial records and audio recordings that could have destroyed the entire operation and led to criminal prosecutions of dozens of participants. Most chilling was Foster's revelation that the network had maintained surveillance on Michael's activities for months before his disappearance, tracking his movements, monitoring his communications, and identifying his contacts. The operation to eliminate Michael had been carefully planned and executed with military precision, designed to appear as a simple theft while actually representing a sophisticated assassination. As Jennifer and Robert processed Foster's revelations, they realized that their investigation had uncovered evidence of one of the most extensive corruption schemes in Portland's history. The implications extended far beyond Michael Thompson's individual case, potentially implicating dozens of current and former officials in serious criminal activities that had continued operating for decades. However, Foster's final revelation would prove to be the most shocking discovery of all. Michael Thompson might still be alive, hidden under an assumed identity as part of an unofficial witness protection arrangement that had kept him safe but separated from his family for nearly 30 years. Portland, Oregon, November 2023. The possibility that Michael Thompson might still be alive transformed Jennifer Walsh and Robert Chen's investigation from a cold case review into an urgent search for a living witness who could expose decades of corruption. Their breakthrough came through an unexpected ally, investigative journalist Thomas Anderson, who had been quietly researching similar corruption cases throughout the Pacific Northwest for a book project. Anderson's extensive database of unsolved cases and suspicious deaths during the 1990s revealed patterns that extended far beyond Portland's municipal boundaries. His research had identified a network of interconnected corruption schemes operating in Seattle, Spokane, Eugene, and smaller cities throughout Oregon and Washington. The systematic nature of these operations suggested coordination at a level that required significant resources and political protection. Most significantly, Anderson had discovered references to a federal witness protection program that had operated outside official channels during the mid-1990s. This unofficial program had been designed to protect individuals who possessed evidence of corruption involving law enforcement agencies, situations where traditional witness protection protocols might be compromised by the very officials responsible for providing security. Anderson's investigation had identified at least 12 individuals who had disappeared under suspicious circumstances during the 1990s, only to resurface years later under new identities in distant locations. The pattern suggested that these individuals had been relocated through unofficial channels rather than eliminated, representing a more sophisticated approach to managing potential witnesses than simple assassination. The journalist's research included a case remarkably similar to Michael Thompson's disappearance. Restaurant owner Charles Miller had vanished from Eugene, Oregon in 1993 after reportedly discovering evidence of money laundering through his establishment. Miller's truck had been found abandoned, his business closed permanently, and his family left to wonder about his fate. However, Anderson had discovered that a man matching Miller's description had been operating a small cafe in rural Montana under the name Christopher Adams. This discovery prompted Jennifer and Robert to expand their search beyond traditional missing persons databases. Working with Anderson, they began searching for individuals who had established new businesses or obtained employment in food service industries throughout the western United States after 1994. The search parameters focused on men in their 30s who had suddenly appeared in small communities without clear background histories. Their investigation revealed a sophisticated relocation system that had helped threatened witnesses disappear while maintaining some degree of contact with federal authorities. The system appeared to have been operated by a small group of federal agents who specialized in cases involving corrupt local law enforcement, situations where traditional protection protocols could not guarantee witness safety. Records from the Social Security Administration, accessed through Freedom of Information Act requests, revealed several instances of new Social Security numbers being issued to individuals who matched Michael Thompson's general description and age range. While privacy laws prevented direct identification, the timing and geographic distribution of these new identities suggested possible connections to the unofficial Witness Protection Program. The most promising lead emerged from unemployment insurance records in rural Washington state. A man named Timothy Roberts had filed for benefits in 1995 after claiming his restaurant business had failed due to economic conditions. Roberts's employment history began abruptly in late 1994, with no prior records of Social Security contributions or tax filings. His listed previous address was a post office box in a small town near the Canadian border. Further investigation revealed that Timothy Roberts had operated a small diner in the town of Republic, Washington, for approximately 18 months before closing the business and moving to an unknown location. Local newspaper archives contained photographs of Roberts serving customers at his establishment, and the images bore a striking resemblance to Michael Thompson, despite obvious attempts to alter his appearance through weight loss and facial hair changes. Most compelling was the discovery that Roberts had specialized in barbecue sandwiches and homemade potato salad, the same menu items that had made Michael's Kitchen popular at Portland festivals. Former customers remembered Roberts as a friendly but somewhat reserved individual who seemed oddly knowledgeable about Portland area events and attractions, despite claiming to be from California. Anderson's investigation had also uncovered evidence that the unofficial Witness Protection Program had maintained periodic contact with relocated individuals through a network of intermediaries. These contacts served to monitor the witness's safety and provide assistance when necessary, while maintaining plausible deniability for federal agencies that could not officially acknowledge the program's existence. The system appeared to have been particularly active during the mid-1990s, when widespread corruption in local law enforcement agencies had made traditional witness protection protocols ineffective or dangerous. Federal authorities had needed alternative methods for protecting individuals who possessed evidence of crimes involving police officers, judges, and municipal officials. Jennifer's research into Michael's family background revealed that his sister in Sacramento had received periodic anonymous packages containing small amounts of cash and generic greeting cards with no return addresses. The packages had arrived sporadically over the years, always during times when the family faced financial difficulties. The sister had assumed these gifts came from a charitable organization, but the timing and amounts suggested possible support from Michael himself. Most intriguingly, phone records from Michael's sister's residence showed brief calls from various payphones throughout the western United States over the past 2 decades. The calls had always occurred on significant dates: Michael's birthday, their mother's birthday, and the anniversary of their father's death. The sister remembered these calls as wrong numbers or hang-ups, but the pattern suggested someone who knew the family's important dates was checking on their welfare. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Anderson discovered references to the unofficial Witness Protection Program in FBI files that had been declassified through court orders related to other corruption cases. These documents confirmed that such a program had existed and had been used to relocate approximately 30 individuals during the 1990s who possessed evidence of crimes involving corrupt law enforcement officials. Most shocking was the discovery that several of these relocated witnesses had eventually been brought back to testify in federal prosecutions that had occurred years or even decades after their disappearances. The delayed prosecutions had been necessary to ensure that corrupt officials who might have interfered with earlier investigations were no longer in positions of authority. Federal court records revealed that the Portland corruption case had been the subject of ongoing federal investigation since the mid-1990s, with prosecutors building comprehensive cases against multiple defendants while waiting for political conditions that would allow successful prosecutions. The investigation had required extraordinary patience and secrecy to avoid alerting targets who maintained significant influence within law enforcement agencies. As Jennifer, Robert, and Anderson assembled their evidence, they realized that Michael Thompson's case represented just one element of a massive federal investigation that had been operating in secrecy for nearly 3 decades. The corruption scheme that had targeted Michael was apparently still under investigation, with federal authorities continuing to build cases against participants who remained in positions of authority. The implications were staggering. Not only might Michael Thompson still be alive, but his eventual testimony could be the key to exposing the full extent of a corruption network that had operated with impunity for decades. However, contacting Michael prematurely could jeopardize not only his safety, but also federal prosecutions that might finally bring justice to the criminals who had forced him into hiding nearly 30 years earlier. Portland, Oregon, December 2023. The delicate balance between Jennifer Walsh's determination to find Michael Thompson and the need to protect an ongoing federal investigation reached a critical juncture when FBI Special Agent Rachel Martinez contacted the investigative team directly. Agent Martinez, who had been monitoring their research activities through digital surveillance protocols, revealed that the federal investigation into Portland's corruption network was approaching its final phase after nearly 3 decades of careful preparation. The scope of the federal case was far more extensive than Jennifer, Robert Chen, and journalist Thomas Anderson had imagined. Operation Mountain Justice, as it was classified, had been documenting criminal activities involving over 60 individuals across multiple states, including current and former political officials, law enforcement personnel, business leaders, and organized crime figures who had operated with virtual impunity since the early 1990s. Agent Martinez confirmed that Michael Thompson was indeed alive and had been living under federal protection since his disappearance in 1994. His relocation had been necessary after he had gathered extensive evidence of the money laundering scheme, including audio recordings of meetings with corrupt officials and detailed financial records that documented millions of dollars in illegal transactions. The evidence he possessed was so comprehensive that it could have exposed the entire network if he had been allowed to testify immediately. However, the corruption network's influence within law enforcement agencies at that time had made immediate prosecution impossible. Several key investigators and prosecutors who might have handled the case were themselves participants in the scheme or subject to intimidation from network participants. Federal authorities had made the difficult decision to relocate Michael temporarily while building a more comprehensive case that would ensure successful prosecutions. The decision to delay prosecution had proven wise as additional evidence accumulated over the years. Other witnesses had come forward, financial records had been preserved through various investigations, and technological advances had made previously unusable evidence accessible to prosecutors. Most importantly, many of the corrupt officials who had been in positions to interfere with prosecutions had retired, died, or been removed from authority. Agent Martinez revealed that the investigation had identified the full structure of the criminal network, which had operated as a sophisticated enterprise with connections extending throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. The Portland operation had been just one node in a larger system that had laundered proceeds from drug trafficking, tax evasion, illegal gambling, and various forms of fraud through legitimate businesses and construction projects. The network's leadership had included several prominent Portland business figures who had used their political connections and community standing to facilitate criminal activities. David Martinez, the former city councilman, had served as the operation's primary political facilitator, using his position to expedite permits, zoning changes, and municipal contracts that benefited network participants. Detective William Foster's role had been equally crucial, as he had systematically misdirected investigations, destroyed evidence, and intimidated potential witnesses who might have exposed the operation. His assignment to investigate Michael Thompson's disappearance had been deliberately arranged to ensure that the case would be handled incompetently and quickly closed without uncovering the truth. The federal investigation had documented how the network had generated enormous profits while maintaining a facade of legitimate business activity. Construction projects that existed primarily on paper had provided vehicles for laundering illegal proceeds, while participating small businesses had received substantial payments for minimal services that helped clean dirty money through apparently legitimate transactions. Most disturbing was the revelation that the network had employed systematic intimidation and elimination tactics to maintain participant loyalty and silence potential witnesses. The pattern of disappearances, suspicious deaths, and forced relocations that Jennifer and Robert had identified represented just a fraction of the network's enforcement activities over the years. Agent Martinez confirmed that Michael Thompson had not been the only individual who had been forced into federal protection after threatening to expose the network. Several other business owners, municipal employees, and even law enforcement officers who had attempted to investigate or resist the operation had required relocation for their safety. The unofficial witness protection program had been established specifically to handle these cases where traditional protection protocols were inadequate. The evidence that Michael had collected in 1994 remained crucial to the federal prosecution, but additional witnesses and documentation gathered over the subsequent decades had strengthened the case enormously. Financial records preserved through various investigations had documented the full scope of the money laundering activities, while technological analysis of communications and surveillance footage had provided detailed proof of criminal conspiracy. Federal prosecutors were now confident that they could successfully prosecute the remaining network participants without the interference that had made earlier prosecution impossible. Several key figures had already been indicted under sealed charges, while others were under active surveillance as investigators prepared to execute coordinated arrests across multiple jurisdictions. The timing of the investigation's conclusion had been carefully planned to coincide with the retirement or removal of corrupt officials who might have interfered with prosecutions. Federal authorities had waited patiently for political conditions that would allow the comprehensive prosecution of all network participants without the risk of evidence suppression or witness intimidation. Agent Martinez explained that Michael Thompson's willingness to testify remained essential to achieving the maximum impact from the prosecutions. His first-hand knowledge of the network's operations and his recordings of conversations with key participants provided evidence that could not be obtained through other sources. However, his testimony would need to be carefully coordinated with other aspects of the federal case. The revelation that Michael was alive and prepared to testify represented the culmination of Jennifer Walsh's years of wondering about his fate. However, Agent Martinez made clear that contact with Michael would need to be arranged through federal authorities to ensure both his safety and the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Premature disclosure of his location or status could jeopardize not only his welfare, but also the prosecutions that would finally bring justice to those responsible for his forced exile. Most significantly, Agent Martinez revealed that the investigation had uncovered evidence of ongoing criminal activity by network participants who had continued operating after Michael's disappearance. The corruption scheme had evolved and expanded over the decades, adapting to changing political conditions while maintaining its core structure and objectives. Current prosecutions would address not only historical crimes, but also recent criminal activities that had victimized additional individuals and organizations. The federal investigation had also identified victims who had suffered financial losses, personal harm, and professional damage as a result of the network's activities. Restitution proceedings would attempt to recover assets and provide compensation to those who had been harmed by the criminal enterprise, though the full extent of the damages could never be completely remediated. As Agent Martinez concluded her briefing, Jennifer Walsh realized that her investigation had accomplished far more than simply solving Michael Thompson's disappearance. Her determination to uncover the truth had helped bring to light one of the most extensive corruption schemes in Pacific Northwest history, leading to prosecutions that would finally hold accountable those who had operated with impunity for decades. The next phase would involve Michael Thompson's return from 3 decades of exile to testify against those who had forced him into hiding, marking the beginning of a legal reckoning that would expose the full extent of corruption that had infected Portland's political and business establishment for an entire generation. Portland, Oregon, March 2024. The federal courthouse in downtown Portland had not witnessed such intensive security measures since the prosecution of organized crime figures in the 1980s. Operation Mountain Justice culminated in simultaneous arrests across 4 states, bringing to justice individuals who had operated a criminal network for over 30 years while maintaining facades of respectability within their communities. Michael Thompson's return to Portland after nearly 3 decades in federal protection marked the beginning of legal proceedings that would expose the full extent of corruption that had infected the city's political and business establishment. Now 64 years old and bearing little resemblance to the young food truck owner who had disappeared in 1994, Michael had spent years preparing for this moment while living under assumed identities across the western United States. The evidence that Michael presented to federal prosecutors was more comprehensive than investigators had initially realized. His systematic documentation of the money laundering scheme included not only audio recordings of conversations with corrupt officials, but also photographs, financial records, and detailed logs of meetings and transactions that provided prosecutors with an unprecedented view of the criminal network's operations. Federal Judge Catherine Wilson presided over proceedings that would ultimately result in convictions for 37 defendants on charges ranging from money laundering and conspiracy to racketeering and witness intimidation. The prosecutions represented one of the most successful efforts to combat municipal corruption in Pacific Northwest history, dismantling a criminal enterprise that had generated over $50 million in illegal proceeds. Former City Councilman David Martinez received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison after being convicted on multiple counts of corruption, money laundering, and conspiracy. His position had been central to the network's operations, as he had used his political influence to facilitate fraudulent permits, zoning changes, and municipal contracts that had enabled the laundering of illegal proceeds through legitimate business channels. Detective William Foster, whose investigation of Michael's disappearance had been deliberately sabotaged to protect the criminal network, was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. His conviction sent a powerful message about the consequences of using law enforcement authority to facilitate criminal activities rather than pursuing justice. The prosecutions revealed the sophisticated nature of the criminal enterprise that had operated across multiple jurisdictions while maintaining an appearance of legitimate business activity. Construction companies had created phantom projects that existed primarily on paper, providing vehicles for cleaning illegal proceeds through apparently legitimate transactions with subcontractors and suppliers. Small business owners who had participated in the scheme faced varying sentences depending on their level of cooperation and the extent of their involvement. Many received reduced sentences in exchange for testimony against higher-level participants, while others who had been coerced into participation through intimidation received probation and community service rather than prison time. The investigation's success had been made possible by the extraordinary patience and dedication of federal prosecutors who had spent decades building comprehensive cases against all network participants. The delayed prosecutions had allowed investigators to gather evidence that would have been impossible to obtain during the height of the network's political influence in the 1990s. Financial recovery efforts resulted in the seizure of assets worth over $30 million, including real estate, business interests, and bank accounts that had been accumulated through criminal activities. These assets were used to provide restitution to victims who had suffered financial losses as a result of the network's operations, though the full extent of the damages could never be completely remediated. Michael Thompson's testimony proved crucial to achieving maximum sentences for the network's leadership. His first-hand knowledge of the scheme's operations and his recordings of conversations with key participants provided evidence that corroborated other witnesses and documentary proof gathered by federal investigators over the years. The revelation that Michael had been living under federal protection rather than being murdered had profound implications for other missing persons cases from the same era. Federal authorities announced reviews of similar disappearances to determine whether other individuals might have been relocated through unofficial witness protection programs rather than eliminated by criminal networks. Jennifer Walsh's role in uncovering the truth about Michael's disappearance was recognized by federal authorities as essential to the investigation's success. Her meticulous preservation of festival records and her determination to pursue answers had provided crucial evidence that had helped federal prosecutors build their comprehensive case against the criminal network. The prosecutions also resulted in significant reforms within Portland's municipal government, including new oversight procedures for permit approvals, enhanced financial auditing of city contracts, and improved whistleblower protection programs designed to encourage reporting of suspicious activities. These reforms were intended to prevent similar corruption schemes from operating undetected in the future. Michael Thompson's reunion with his surviving family members after 3 decades of separation provided emotional closure to a case that had haunted those who knew him. His sister, who had never stopped wondering about his fate, was finally able to understand the circumstances that had forced his disappearance and the extraordinary measures that had been necessary to protect his life. The successful prosecution of Operation Mountain Justice demonstrated that even the most sophisticated criminal networks could ultimately be brought to justice through persistent investigation and careful preparation. The case served as a model for other jurisdictions facing similar challenges with corruption that had become entrenched within political and law enforcement institutions. Michael Thompson's decision to resume using his real name and return to Portland represented the conclusion of a remarkable journey from victim to witness to survivor. His courage in gathering evidence against the criminal network and his willingness to testify despite personal risks had made possible the prosecution of individuals who had operated with impunity for decades. The case also highlighted the importance of preserving evidence and maintaining hope, even when investigations appear to have reached dead ends. Jennifer Walsh's determination to seek answers decades after Michael's disappearance had ultimately provided the breakthrough that federal investigators needed to bring their long-running investigation to a successful conclusion. As the legal proceedings concluded and sentences were imposed, Portland began the process of recovering from the revelation that corruption had infected its institutions for an entire generation. The prosecutions had exposed the extent to which criminal networks could operate within legitimate governmental and business structures, but they had also demonstrated that justice could ultimately prevail when dedicated individuals refused to accept defeat. Michael Thompson's story had transformed from a mysterious disappearance into a testament to the persistence of truth and the possibility of redemption even after decades of injustice. His return marked not only personal vindication, but also the restoration of faith in legal institutions that had failed him 30 years earlier, but had ultimately succeeded in bringing his persecutors to justice.